Spider-Man license is a curious case, seeing how one of my favorite superheroes and comic book movie characters of all time seems to have all the popularity he can get, but when it comes to the filmmaking aspect of things and even the films themselves, it's been basically becoming for the most part a full-on skepticism party, which is a darn genuine shame because out of all the Spider-Man movies, including Far From Home, which is of course the film we are reviewing right now, there are exactly only 3 Spider-Man movies that I would even classify as filmmaking masterpieces. I remember at first liking Spider-Man Homecoming, seeing it was a great return to the character itself. But ever since the complete rotation of the Earth, I would have to say that Spider-Man Homecoming is just okay. It's a basic harmless summer blockbuster that tried to place things safe in the Marvel license, while at the same time having a little bit of fun as I was watching it. Now we finally arrive at the sequel, Spider-Man Far From Home, which still features Tom Holland as Spider-Man. So let's don our masks and get our web slingers on as we get to talk about Spider-Man Far From Home. In Spider-Man Far From Home, Tom Holland once again reprises his role as Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker. Subsequently, it's a sequel that takes place after the dramatic aftermath of Avengers Endgame. Some lives were restored alongside half of the population of the universe, while the others died enough to become a world-renowned hero. So Spider-Man decides to take time off of being a superhero and decides to live life as a normal teenager. One of which is by going on a European vacation with all of his friends, as well as sharing certain feelings that he has towards MJ, who is played by Zendaya. The vacation is unfortunately hijacked by Nick Fury, on the other hand, who essentially goes to Peter Parker and says, hey, there is an otherworldly threat that is unlike anything that you have ever faced in your life. There are these otherworldly-like monsters that are known as elementals that have transported from this other dimension or multiverse and now are resurrecting from different parts across the globe. And thus, as a bonus, alongside his journey, he's being partnered up with Dr. Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, who came from the exact same universe as these elementals that came into our world, in which both his planet and his family were lost because of them. And so it's up to Spider-Man to handle these responsibilities, not only making time for other people such as MJ and the rest of his friends, but to tackle this otherworldly objective and to save the world from these elementals. So I would have to say, upon further review, after seeing the film in question, I would have to say that Spider-Man Far From Home is fine. It's essentially basically how I feel now about Spider-Man Homecoming, where it's fine, it's not the best. Everything about it feels very standard and competent, but at the same time, it also has to deal with some serious flaws. I know from the fan base's point of view, it's probably going to be an everlasting fight to see who is the best Spider-Man out of any of these 3 actors, but Tom Holland as Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, does a fundamentally terrific job as his character. He still contains the same wide of characteristics that a teenager, i.e. Peter Parker, would contain, with him having to try to overcome the odds, tackle objectives, as well as living life as a simple teenager and telling the girl that he has a crush on his feelings towards her. And it's one of the more consistent things that I really like from Spider-Man Homecoming. The rest of the cast also provide good quality performances alongside Zendaya as MJ, who is essentially the girl Peter Parker has a crush on. The script gives her character more stuff to do aside from her character in Spider-Man Homecoming, and I would have to say that both Tom Holland and Zendaya basically have some good chemistry throughout the film, as they basically kind of contain the equivalent romance of what usually high schoolers would usually have in the modern age. But if there's one actor who definitely deserves the spotlight more than anyone in this movie, it's Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. Jake Gyllenhaal has been merely excellent in every single movie he's in, whether it's Zodiac, Brokeback Mountain, Donnie Darko, October Sky, and even mediocre stuff like Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. He still knows how to find a way to make his performance truly remarkable to the audience. And his performance as Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, is no exception. Every single time that Quentin Beck or Mysterio is on screen, your eyes are exactly locked and loaded on his performance. Not to mention that his performance for the vast majority of his screen time contains a huge amount of charisma. And speaking of what I said about the second act of the movie, the second act of the film is where stuff really kicks in, or more or less most of the third act of the film. The film inserts most of the drama that should have been implemented the first time. It's done at a significantly competent level. And when it comes to the action, where it started out standard pretty much in the second act of the movie, when the third act kicks in, it's unbelievable. It makes up for some fairly decent entertainment in a major movie blockbuster like Spider-Man Far From Home. However, if you want to get to the second half of the movie, or more or less the third act of the film, it's going to require a lot of indefatigable patience, which probably leads to one of the biggest problems of Spider-Man Far From Home. The first acts are underwhelmingly slow and dull. For the most part, when it comes to the first act and half of the second act, I wasn't even caring about anything that was going on, even in the slightest bit. For starters, the comedy. When you usually see a Marvel movie, or more or less a Spider-Man movie, it does inject good bits of humor. And it does it well to the point to where when you're watching it, you're not like, oh my god, this is brutal, I don't want to see any more of this. But the comedy throughout Spider-Man Far From Home is just merely chuckle-worthy at best. Other than that, there wasn't really a huge laugh I had throughout the movie. It has the humor and the feel of a Disney Channel or a Teenage style level of comedy. When the movie is offering running gags to characters like Martin Starr as Mr. Harrington or his assistant played by J.B. Smoove, and not a lot of the audience is laughing, that pretty much speaks volumes with this film's comedy. And it's not because I don't like to laugh at anything that is supposed to be funny. I mean, I like to laugh at a lot of things, but most of the humor that takes place in the movie is just all easy jokes. To me, it just personally wasn't that funny. There's also some spotty CGI, especially stuff that has to do with not only the elemental creatures that come out of the ground. It looked about merely cartoonish and a bit fake in some shots, and even in some stuff like crashing buildings. When they go onto the floor of the city, it just looks inexcusably half-assed, and it looks like they could have done more with the visual effects that they had, despite the incredibly huge budget. And another problem that Spider-Man Far From Home contains, exactly like Spider-Man Homecoming does, some of the characters in this movie aren't characters, they're caricatures, where they are essentially given nothing to do but to deliver unfunny bits of forced comedy relief. But then you basically have characters who are basically there to ensue conflict. For example, there was this character named Brad Davis who also kind of has a thing for MJ. And both him and Peter Parker basically have to fight for the affection of MJ. This guy is a nothing character. He is just there as a plot device to ensue conflict between Peter Parker and him trying to share his feelings with MJ. However, in the grand scheme of things, you have no idea who this guy is or where he plays into the story, so why are you supposed to care about anything that happens to him? And the moral dilemma that Peter Parker basically faces, it's made to look like this big deal that's surrounding his life, but it's not. It's basically kind of like the moral dilemma that is sort of similar to Spider-Man 2, except Spider-Man 2 handled it in the most pristine and A-plus possible way. He's trying to maintain a job and pay rent. He's trying to explain his feelings towards Mary Jane Watson and how he really feels. While in the meantime, he's still trying to tackle responsibilities of being Spider-Man, while he also wants to maintain the life of him being a normal person. And it's the definitive reason as to why Spider-Man and Peter Parker are so remarkable and relatable to us. With Tom Holland, his primary objective is that, yeah, I really want to save the world and such, but I also have a girl that I have a crush on, and I also want to talk to her and tell her how I feel and maybe kiss her. You just want to go to Peter Parker and say, Peter, you're fine. I think you have more important stuff to handle rather than this high school drama BS. And as far as I'm concerned, you have Stark technology. Everyone knows that you saved the world from total destruction, and everyone acknowledges the fact that you're everyone's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. You're fine. You can handle everything under control. Overall, guys, Spider-Man Far From Home is an exceptionally decent Marvel movie. Tom Holland and the rest of the cast is very good in their performances. Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio completely steals the show. There's competently implemented drama that happens towards the third act or maybe the second half of the film, and the action, while still solid, is still marginally entertaining. Unfortunately, you have to deal with the first acts being completely underwhelming, dealing with things like unfunny teen Nick level comedy, very spotty CGI in some scenes, characters that basically play out like caricatures and not actual characters. And there were some certain aspects about the central conflict and turmoil that he has to deal with that I just really didn't buy. So it basically has to come down to the fact that I have to give Spider-Man Far From Home a 3 out of 5. Alright guys, so that is my review of Spider-Man Far From Home. Comment below, let me know what you thought about the movie. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. And also, if you would like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Nukem. Let's hope we meet again, Spider-Man.